Welcome to the Australians campaign headquarters once again with just one more sleep to go until polling day. Peter Van Onselen, the campaign is over. There were really no surprises in the campaign, in my view, except for the fact that Kevin Rudd really didn't campaign well. We didn't really get a coherent message out of Kevin Rudd.
Well, I was about to say, the surprise for me isn't that Labor looks like they're going to lose. It's the size of the loss and the lack of direction that they had on the campaign. Kevin Rudd, you would have thought, he's had 3 years to think about how he came back as Prime Minister. You would have thought he would have spent just a little bit of time about what he might want to do once he got there, particularly what he might want to do in a campaign sense once he got there. He's taken over the prize at the last moment. The polls have seen him lift in popularity, as has Labor, but he didn't have a plan to follow that through, and his campaign has been directionless.
Yeah, I thought the poll lift for Kevin Rudd was always going to dissipate pretty quickly once the election was called. It was a bit of a welcome back for Kevin, and once people were focusing their minds on the actual choice, Labor was going to go back to its fundamentally difficult situation. But I agree, I thought Kevin Rudd has good campaign skills and would have delivered a coherent message. And I thought it was pretty obvious to see what Labor's message would be. You would have thought they would be talking about their big plans for the future and be asking voters to keep them in office to finish their plans on the NBN, on the disability care services, and also on the education funding. And allow us to complete the job. Yet he never really delivered that message strongly.
Yeah, allow them to complete the job in policy areas that we know they have a proven level of good grace from the public in, rather than the economy. He made it all about the economy, which was the way the campaign started. He talked about the global financial crisis as something that he saved the nation from as a reason to re-elect him. It wasn't even a reason, we've said this before, for his own party not to remove him in his first term. Yeah. So it's almost like he wasn't willing to hold on to some of these naturally Labor favouring policy scripts because they were scripts that Julia Gillard made the running on.
Well, that's the critical point. There would have been a campaign strategy mapped out before Kevin Rudd came back to the leadership. In other words, Julia Gillard's team and ALP headquarters would have had a campaign strategy mapped out. Presumably, it must have focused a lot on education and disability care. Do you think that Kevin Rudd came back in and essentially junked that the campaign that Labor had ready to go?
Well, I suspect if they had a campaign ready to go in Julia Gillard's office, only the paper clips to it were all that were left in the room. But even if that's wrong, and even if there was a more magnanimous handover, I do think that Kevin Rudd's ego got in the road. I think he thought a combination of his own popularity, or perceived popularity, coupled with what he continued to feel like was always his big mantra, that he saved Australia from the GFC. His colleagues didn't give him enough credit for it. They removed him back in 2010. The public never had a chance to give him credit for it on the campaign trail 3 years ago. He tried to reprise it here, but it was just leftovers as far as most people were concerned, and he did it at the expense of tactics that could have seen not Labor win, but it could have seen them hold a lot more seats than they're going to tomorrow.
Indeed, I never thought they could win, but I thought they could perhaps narrow their losses to 20 seats. It looks like it'll probably be more than that tomorrow. We'll see. But the other side of the equation, let's talk about the coalition and the opposition campaign. I thought Tony Abbott, while he was never really strongly tested during the campaign, obviously ran a very, very disciplined campaign. He was on message the whole time. Even, it seems, when he created a bit of a stir, it seemed to be largely on message. I'm thinking, of course, when he told Kevin Rudd, or asked whether Kevin Rudd will ever shut up, that was a key message of the Liberals, was that Labor were all talk, no action, especially Kevin Rudd. So, he had a very good campaign. I suppose that's what we should have expected, given what he did in 2010.
Well, that's right, and also given the last 3 years, which have been pretty solid for the coalition. He had a few little gaps here and there, but they were nothing major, and they were inside the beltway issues. And to the extent that they may have been the kind of thing that would hurt a leader in a campaign, when you're such a front runner and you're already having everything else going so well, they were never going to hurt him as such. I do think that there are some players in the coalition team that didn't have as great a campaign, but Tony Abbott's not one of them. This was a deliberately presidential campaign. Kevin Rudd wanted it to be one, and he ended up being the worst of the two candidates.
Exactly. Labor thought that would really work for them, Abbott versus Rudd, but Abbott turned the tables. He actually looked prime ministerial increasingly throughout the campaign.
And his ratings, his net satisfaction rating was almost triple Kevin Rudd's in the last news poll. It'll be interesting to see what tomorrow's polls reveal right across the spectrum. But a presidential campaign, if Labor thought that Tony Abbott was the unpopular one, the campaign has ended with Kevin Rudd deeply unpopular, and people taking a second look at Tony Abbott, and that's going to help him as an incumbent Prime Minister all the more.
All right, well, we both think that the government's headed for an emphatic loss here, or an emphatic victory for the coalition on Saturday. Both Peter and I will be filing for the Australian and Sky News throughout the weekend. Peter, I think you've got Deputy Opposition Leader Julie Bishop on Sunday morning.
And also Richard Marles.
Good, and I'll have former Opposition Leader Malcolm Turnbull on Viewpoint Sunday night. That's all for Campaign HQ.